Oh. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Ramo Rajamanis Sada Vijayate Ramam Ramesham Bhaje Ramena Bihata Nishacharachamu Ramaya Tasmai Namaha. Raman Nasti Parayanam Parataram Ramasya Dasosmyaham Rame Chittalaya Sada Bhavatu Me Bho Rama Mamuddhara Samasta Jana Kalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satkurum Brahma Vidwaram Satkurum Brahma Vidwaram Akhandam Satchidanandam Avang Manasagocharam Atmanam Akhiladharam Ashraye Bhishta Siddhaye Arthato Pyadvayanandan Ati Tadvaita Bhanatah Guruna Radhya Vedanta Saram Vakshe Yathamati. Hari Om. We'll chant 49th verse together. Vana Vruksha Tad Avachinna Akashayoho Jalashaya Jala Tadgata Pratibimba-Avaccheda-vada Va Adhara Bhuta Anupahita Akashavate Anayoho Ajnana Tat Upahita Chaitanya Yoho Adhara Bhutam Yat Anupahitam Chaitanyam Tatturiyam Iti Uchchate Shantam Shivam Advaitam Chaturtham Manyante Sa Atma Savidneyaha Ityadi Shrutehe. Swamiji has completed describing Vyashti Upadi, Samashti Upadi, Vyashti Upahita Chaitanya and Samashti Upahita Chaitanya. After having described all these four, Swamiji said there is no difference between Vyashti Upadi and Samashti Upadi. There is no difference between Vyashti Upahita Chaitanya and Samashti Upahita Chaitanya. And we saw that this is the main fundamental point for our sadhana of Karma Yoga. As this Jiva, if one is able to surrender to Bhagavan with this thought that Bhagavan, you are the whole, I am the part. But at what level is this part and whole relationship? At Upadi level and at Upahita Chaitanya level. Conditioning and conditioned consciousness. If somebody is able to do that, Bhagavan says, Name Bhakta Pranashyati. This Jiva who has dissolved himself into me, that Jiva, he will never be drowned in any problem. Name Bhakta, Pranasha means what? Some obstacle, some problem. He says, my devotee will not drown in that. How does Bhagavan take care of devotees? How does Samashti take care of Vyashti? What did Dashrath Maharaj say to the queens yesterday? Rakehu nayana palaka ki nai. Just like eyelids take care of the eyes, In that way, Bhagwan takes care of devotees. That is a sambandha, Vyashti and Samashti. If Vyashti dissolves in Samashti, then Samashti takes care of that Vyashti. So in sadhana, Karma Yoga is not only doing a particular action. It is also not doing a lot of action. Right? Sometimes we feel, in this particular job, I am not happy. I have to choose some other, type of job, because that is more Karma Yoga than this former one. That is more social service oriented. The first one is not as much. So the type of job is not an indicator of Karma Yoga. You say, I'm doing little work right now. I want to do a lot of work. Means, have too many things on the plate. That also is not an indicator of Karma Yoga. Both are very good. Both are indicators of karma, which is slightly different from Karma Yoga. Karma means actions. So there can be somebody who is very busy, and it's a great, quality to have, compared to somebody who is tamasic. So this person is, much better. But Karma Yogi, how will we define who is a Karma Yogi? This Karma Yogi is the one who thinks about Samashti before Vyashti. If it is possible, then his absolute Samashti is Bhagavan. So in every action, he thinks about, will this thing please my Bhagavan or not? Will this action, will this thought have an approval of my Bhagavan's grace, or will it have my Bhagavan's approval? Right? If somebody is not able to directly think of the absolute totality, then smaller versions of totality. It could be the institute, it could be the company, the family, but definitely beyond individual. I cannot say this is my Vyashti. I start here and I end here. I say no. It is something beyond this one individual, keeping the goal of that totality in mind, keeping the goal of that group in mind, whatever will help accomplish things for that totality, according to that is this person's vyavahara. Then there is no individual guidance needed for each and every circumstance. In this particular situation, how should I do? In that particular situation, what should I do? Guidance is only one. Whatever helps accomplish the work of totality, whatever helps bring good to the totality, do that. So sometimes it would be saying something which will help accomplish things for the totality. Sometimes it would be not saying something which will help accomplish things for totality. Sometimes it would be stepping up, sometimes it would be stepping back. These are the other sadhana sides, practical sides of the whole discussion what we just had. Vyashti Samashti, it is not only an intellectual concept. It has to be known, and then one has to put forth effort to practice it. Knowledge of Vedanta, only knowing, because you cannot do anything after that. Right? But when it comes to sadhana, it is knowing first, knowing it correctly, and then doing it. Okay. Then came the topic of Turiya. We said Turiya is the fourth. Actually speaking, this should be the fifth, right? Because two Upadhis were described, two Upahita Chaitanyas were described. So what will you count the Turiya as? It should have been the fifth. Or if you just take Upahita Chaitanya, it should have been the third. Right? Vyashti Upahita Chaitanya, Samashti Upahita Chaitanya, and Turiya. Why is it called the fourth? It is called fourth from avastha standpoint, which is going to come later. Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. Compared to or keeping these three avasthas in mind, Turiya is the fourth. We had seen the example of three syllables, Ra, A, and Ma. That's an example, huh? Just like the silence is a substratum of all the three syllables, even though it is a substratum, it is different from it. When you say Ra, silence is already there. But does that mean that Ra has affected that silence? We say no, that silence is unaffected by itself. That is why you have to point it out as a fourth entity. It is present in and through the three, but yet it is different from the three. So like that, it is this Turiya, which is present in all three states of experiences, but yet it is different from the three states: waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. So Swamiji said in the 49th verse that this Turiya is Adhara Bhuta Chaitanya. Adhara Bhuta Chaitanya. It is a substratum. What is the other name of Adhara Bhuta Chaitanya? Anupahita Chaitanya. Somebody said non-upahita Chaitanya. Either way you understand. Anupahita Chaitanya, that is this Adhara Bhuta Chaitanya. It is a substratum. It is a substratum of what? Substratum of Upadhi, substratum of conditioning, and substratum of Upahita Chaitanya. Means Upahita Chaitanya means conditioned consciousness. Conditioning and conditioned consciousness, the substratum of that is this unconditioned consciousness. But the irony is, everything gets so mixed up that our attention never goes on this substratum. Just like in the space example, there was tree, which was the conditioning. There was space conditioned by that tree, and then there was unconditioned space. There was forest, space conditioned by that forest, and unconditioned space. But when we go in a forest, do we even pay attention to space? So where did you go? I went to a forest. What did you see? I saw trees. You see, that is how jivas live in this world. We have come here, but all our attention is either on Upadhi or at the most on Upahita Chaitanya. Upahita Chaitanya means this ahankara you take. Means that sentiency which is there. Even that is not recognized before we come to Vedanta. Right? I am a sentient being. That thought also Vedanta only introduces to us. We just take our name for granted. We say, I am this person. But in and through all of that, unconditioned consciousness, that doesn't get recognized. Okay, so that is mentioned in the next verse now, 50th verse. Idameva turiyam, shuddha chaitanyam, ajnanadi, tat upahita chaitanyabhyam, taptayah pindavate, aviviktam sate, mahavakyasya vacyam, viviktam sate, laksham iti, cha uchyate. Chochate is which sandhi? Cha plus uchyate. You can type it. Cha plus uchyate is good. Guna sandhi. I hope you all are splitting the words in between. I have no clue what is happening without your videos on. Idameva turiyam shuddha chaitanyam ajnanadi tat upahita chaitanyabhyam. Ajnana adi. That is the place where we split it. Ajnana adi. Idameva turiyam. What we just described, this turiya which is Shantam, Shivam, Advaitam, that which is the main subject matter of entire Advaita Vedanta. Subject matter of entire Vedas, that which is the sole purpose of life to discover and abide in, that turiya, idameva turiyam. Shuddha Chaitanyam. You remember what was said in Prameya definition? Jiva Brahma Aikyam, Shuddha Chaitanyam. This is the subject matter of Vedantasara, but entire Vedanta. Several other things will be described, but don't miss the main point. Panchakosha will be described, Avasthatraya will be described, creation will be described. All of that is to come to Shuddha Chaitanya, which is the main subject matter of Vedanta. Shuddha Chaitanyam, Ajnanadi tad upahita Chaitanyabhyam. What happens is, this Shuddha Chaitanya gets mixed up with Ajnanam, which is Upadi, the conditioning, and Upahita Chaitanya, the conditioned consciousness. Okay, three things as though are getting mixed up now. What are the three things again? Shuddha Chaitanya, Ajnanam or ignorance, and consciousness conditioned by this ignorance, conditioned consciousness. Three things are getting mixed up. Taptayaf Pindavata. How is it getting mixed up? Just like the iron ball and the fire. Two very distinct things, they become mixed up and look as one. Taptayaf Pindavata, Aviviktam Sata, Mahavakyasya Vachya. When these three things are mixed up, aviviktam means when they are not separated. Viviktam means separated, aviviktam means not separated. When these three things appear as one, they get mixed up. This turiya, that alone is referred to as the Vachya-Lakshya artha, the literal meaning or the direct meaning of Mahavakya. Okay, I will repeat again. Pay attention. There are three things which are getting mixed up. What are the three things? Turiya, Ajnana, and Ajnana Upahita Chaitanya. Pure consciousness, conditioning, and conditioned consciousness. When these three things mix up, it appears as one. You don't see them distinctly. So in Mahavakya, when it is said Tattvamasi, the direct meaning of that is referring to this Turiya alone. Okay? But when it is mixed up, it is called as Vachya-Artha, not separated from its conditioning. When it is said Tat, Sat, Tvam Asi, so when the teacher says Tvam, he is referring to that same Turiya. But because in the student's mind, he is mixing conditioning also. In the beginning, he says, sometimes he doesn't even know that I am Turiya. Turiya is not even included. There is only conditioning or conditioned consciousness. But let us say after Adhyaropa, he includes consciousness also in that equation. So when these three things are together mixed up, that is called as Vachya-Artha. The literal meaning of the word, literal meaning of Mahavakya. Tattvam Asi. So Swamiji is saying over here, even when you say Vachya-Artha, you are referring to Turiya only. It took me a while to understand this one. You pay attention to the words. Idameva Turiyam. Idameva Turiyam Mahavakyasya Vachyam. Leave the middle part. He just says, Idameva Turiyam Mahavakyasya Vachyam. Did you find that? In the fourth line, he says that, right? Idameva Turiyam is the first two words, and then he says, end of third line and fourth, end of second line and the third line, he says, Mahavakyasya Vachyam. This Turiya alone is the Vachyartha of Mahavakya. What is Vachyartha? So previously he says, Vachyartha is when conditioning or when consciousness, conditioning and unconditioned consciousness, they are mixed up. Idameva Turiyam Mahavakyasya Vachyam. But what is Vachyam? Why do you say it is Vachyam? Because the other two things are mixed up over here. Aviviktam. Like what? Like this iron ball and fire. You can take that iron ball to be Ajnanam and Upahita Chaitanya, and fire to be pure consciousness. Two very different things have mixed up. But when you say, iron ball burnt me, iron ball burnt me, what are you implying there? You say the fire in the iron ball burnt me. So like that he is saying, when everything is mixed up also, the Vachyartha, the direct meaning of Mahavakya, is referring to that Turiya only. Don't miss Turiya from this equation. Don't subtract consciousness from this equation. Taptaya Pindavat Aviviktam Sat Mahavakyasya Vachyam. So what are the three things getting mixed up? That is the previous part. He says Shuddha Chaitanyam Ajnanadi Tat Upahita Chaitanyamyam Aviviktam. So Shuddha Chaitanyam is the first entity, Ajnanam is the second entity, and Upahita Chaitanya is the third entity. All these three things are getting mixed up. Now, simple example of Vachyartha. You say, I ate banana. Right? Now, what is the understanding there? If somebody says, oh, the peel of banana is so hard, did you eat that also? See, no. When I say I ate banana, it is the pulp of that, not the peel. If you take everything as together, that is, your limitation. So even when that statement is made, what is being referred to is something else. Bhagwan Rama gives this example to Lakshmanji in Rama Gita. Okay, in Valmiki Ramayana, the Rama Gita which comes, not Tulsi Ramayana. He says, we should understand Mahavakya just like you drink coconut water. So coconut water, what is the connection? So just like you take the coconut water and discard the outer covering, the shell which is hard, right? That is discarded. Like that, you should discard the conditionings and just hold on to this Turiya Brahma. If I say I drank coconut water, what is the Vachyartha there? Vachyartha is also coconut water. But if I'm mixing it up along with conditioning, if I'm keeping conditionings as true, then it is called as Vachyam, Vachyartha. If I let go of conditionings, then what happens? You see the later part. Viviktam Sata Lakshyam iti cha uchyate. If you have separated out the things which got mixed up, then that is called as Lakshyartha. The implied meaning of this Mahavakya, that same Turiya becomes the implied meaning of that Mahavakya. So Tattvamasi Mahavakya, if you just say it along with conditionings, then Turiya alone is referred to by that Tattvamasi Mahavakya. But because you are mixing up with conditioning, that is called as Vachyartha. Tattvamasi literally refers to that Shuddha Chaitanya only. But if you separate it out, Viviktam Sata, if you separate out pure consciousness, conditioning, and conditioned consciousness, if you separate it out and understand that this conditioning and conditioned consciousness is a superimposition, they are not even there to begin with, then that understanding of Turiya is Lakshyartha of Mahavakya. Okay. So Vachyartha is when all things are mixed up. Lakshartha is when things are separated out and you actually point out what are you referring to. Okay. Now, iron ball and fire example, it comes in several places, but it comes for different topics also. But we should understand here what is being pointed out. The two entities which are so different in their nature, they are getting mixed up. Right? Iron ball is cold. Iron ball is round. Right? It doesn't have any other light or any property. Fire, on the other hand, is hot. It doesn't have shape. It doesn't have any weight. But when two things get mixed up, this iron ball and fire gets mixed up, what do we get finally? We get a round, red, hot iron ball. Or you just say a ball, because you don't even know sometimes whether it's iron or something else when it's glowing, right? So this is just to say that two properties which did not belong to each other before, they got mixed up. Like that, Shuddha Chaitanya, which is our own true nature, and this Ajnanam, which is so different from our true nature, they got mixed up. This conditioned consciousness and Shuddha Chaitanya also got mixed up, and then entire khichdi happened. You see what are the implications after that? Just like we don't notice that space when we nicely go around in the forest, we have lived several janmas without knowing our true nature. And one thing you should appreciate in Vedantasara is how much importance is given to every conditioning. This is the only text probably where Ajnanam is described in so much of detail. After this will come Ahankara, physical body, all those things will come later. But Swamiji spent so much time describing Ajnanam to show that this is not who we are. He spent time to show conditioned consciousness, to come to this point that you are not Upadhi, you are not Upahita Chaitanya, you are Turiya. Okay. So this was the second part of this text. First part was Sadhana Chatushtaya. So now you see the next portion is going to start now. Extensions of ignorance. Now we have just defined ignorance. Now we will describe what are the things which are coming as an effect of this ignorance. Entire creation, all sense organs, physical body, everything is going to describe. There was one topic which got left in between. That is about these two vadas. What are the two vadas that we saw? Avaccheda-vada and Pratibimba-Avaccheda-vada. Two examples were given, right? One is that space getting conditioned by the tree and the forest, and the space getting reflected in the drop and in the lake. Two vadas were given. Now, generally, people have a question, which vada is better? So that I'll go and study only that vada, not the other one. So one thing we should appreciate about vada is, there are two different ways of pointing out the same truth. And each one has its advantage, each one has its limitation. Just like everything in Bhagwan's creation, these vadas also have advantages and they have some limitation. Now see the advantage of Avaccheda-vada. What did we say? That there is unconditioned space. There is conditioned space. That space which is getting conditioned by the tree. Tree is the conditioning. There is space which is getting conditioned by that tree, and there is unconditioned space. Now, what is the difference between unconditioned space and the conditioned space? Are they two different entities or are they one and the same? What do you think? Two different or the same? You can type it so you know if you are with me or not. You know what we are discussing now, right? conditioned space and unconditioned space, are they the same or are they different? Same. Now you see, this is what Vedanta wants to tell us. Where you are searching for, or wherever you will find conditioned consciousness, right there you will find unconditioned consciousness. Where there is ahankara, right there is infinite Brahma. Whom I call as this person with my name, right there I should search, right there I will find infinite consciousness. Ananda Swarupa Brahma is right here. That's why Ramana Maharshi in Upadesha-sara he says, all we have to do is come to this aham first. From world, boil your analysis down to thoughts. From idam vritti come to aham vritti. And then inquire, what is this aham? Aham ayam kuto bhavati chinvatah ayi patatyaham nija vicharana. Where does this aham come from? Inquire whether it stays all the time. It doesn't stay in deep sleep. We just saw that. So this cannot be my true identity. So Avaccheda-vada, if we start thinking in that way, it gives us this conviction that wherever you find conditioned consciousness, there alone you will find unconditioned consciousness. This is the advantage of Avaccheda-vada. Now in Pratibimba-Vada, this will be a shortcoming, limitation. What is getting reflected? Space is getting reflected in that water. There is some kind of difference. Space is somewhere and your reflection is somewhere else. There is some distance in between, right? Or if you take sun example, sun is somewhere, reflection is somewhere. So that limitation will come. And this is our understanding many a times. There is reflection happening in my intellect somewhere inside, and consciousness is somewhere else. I have to go and find it. So to challenge that understanding, Avaccheda-vada example is given. Now Pratibimba-vada. What is Pratibimba-vada? You have the drop, and you have the lake, and you have space getting reflected in that lake. So now, the space which is there, that is the substratum of that drop and the lake. Means in that space only you filled that water, right? So it is a substratum of upadhi. And it is a substratum of upahita also. Means reflected space which is there, it is getting supported by this unconditioned space only. So you cannot fully match with that Avaccheda-vada example. But over here, what is happening is, if we get this question, right, that you said, whatever is drishyam, right, whatever is drishyam, that is jadam. But why is it that only few things are able to show sentiency? Right? You have this harmonium also, and you have this physical body also. Both are drishyam. Both are made of Pancha Mahabhuta only. But why is it that harmonium doesn't talk and this physical body talks? So to explain this point, Pratibimba-vada is helpful. You say, even though there is similarity in the conditioning, Upahita Chaitanya will appear only where there is Sattva and there is Sukshmatva. Right? Like sentiency is expressing in mind actually. That mind gets, or ahankara, that gets associated with physical body, and body starts feeling as though it is enlivened. Actually speaking, body is also inert. But how come this mind is able to speak, ahankara is able to speak? You see, because there is some difference in that upadhi. That upadhi is made up of sattva Sattva means out of those three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas guna, tamo guna, mind is made up of sattva. And it is sukshma. It is subtle. It is upadhi, no doubt, but it is subtle upadhi. That is why this consciousness reflects there. And then this sadhaka feels good. All my questions are, getting some kind of logical answers. All vadas are to just eliminate those doubts which can come in our mind. Purpose is not to show that what is sentient, what is insentient. Right? Purpose is to shift attention from both these conditionings to unconditioned consciousness. But every vada, it will have its own advantage and it will always also have its own limitations. Okay, so that we should appreciate over here. So in this entire portion, Swamiji just elaborated what is ajnanam. He started with saying that I'm going to elaborate what is adhyaropa apavada. Vastuni avastu aropaha. In vastu, which is the Shuddha Chaitanya, pure consciousness, Satchidananda Brahma, avastu is getting superimposed. So what is avastu? He started with ajnanam, samashti and vyashti ajnanam, and then said there is samashti and vyashti upahita chaitanya. Through sadhanas, dissolve vyashti in samashti, and through knowledge, transcend upadhi and transcend upahita chaitanya. Okay, all this mix-up which is happening, that is where we need sadhana chatushtaya. One viveka is dharma adharma viveka. What I should do in life, what I should not do in life. Where I should get afraid, where I should not get afraid. How much I should engage, how much I should not engage. Where I should engage, where I should not engage. Now all this viveka falls under sadhana part of viveka. If we have a sattvic buddhi, these decisions will become clearer. But when we come to Vedanta, viveka expected is one level above. What is that viveka? Between conditioning and unconditioned consciousness. In Vedantasara language, viveka between anupahita chaitanya and everything else. Everything else will include upadhi and upahita chaitanya. Okay, with that, the goal is to come and abide in our own true nature as Turiya. That is the thing. Now Swamiji is describing what is the extension of this ignorance. Means what all happened after this ajnanam, came into being. Came into being means once you have defined it, what are the things that this ajnanam does? That also we should understand. Okay, 51st verse. Asya ajnanasya avarana vikshepanamakam asti shakti dvayam asya ajnanasya. This ajnanam which we thoroughly described until 50th verse, whose effects we see in our life day in and day out, that same ajnanam, asya ajnanasya Avarana Vikshepanamakam Shakti Dvayam Asti. There are two powers of this Ajnanam. One is called as Avarana Shakti, another is called as Vikshepa Shakti. In simple words, Avarana Shakti means to hide. Avarana Shakti means to hide, and Vikshepa Shakti means to project. Only hiding, there was not much problem. Like in deep sleep, Avarana Shakti is very well there. But Vikshepa is not there. That is why even if Avarana is there, we are still at bliss. Bhoktrutva is still there in the form that I am Prajna. That is why we say Avarana is still working. But Vikshepa is not there. Thoughts are not there. Perception of this world is not there. But when we wake up, or when we are in dream, this projection starts. Now we should understand that Vedanta will not remove this projection. What is Vedanta going to do? it is going to remove the reality given to this projection. Whatever is a projection, whatever is a superimposition, that need not be physically removed. Just like the snake which is appearing on the rope, if I say that after doing everything, after getting knowledge of that rope, now I'm going to go and remove that snake. Right? Or I say that I have known this rope, that knowledge made this snake go away. I say, no, both are erroneous statements. Knowledge cannot do anything. Literally, it can only tell us nature of a thing as it is. Now, what has this Avarana and Vikshepa Shakti done? In Drugdrishya Viveka, we saw this point. Both these points are described in Drugdrishya Viveka. Shakti dvayam hi mayayaha vikshepavruti rupakam. Vikshepa Shaktir lingadi brahmandantam jagat srujet. Those verses are after 13th verse, I think this comes. So we saw there that Avarana and Vikshepa, one hides, another misguides. My true nature as Ananda Swarupa Brahma is hidden, and Vikshepa is happening to start thinking about myself as this finite being, somebody who is an individual. Vidyaranya Swamiji said, how does this Avarana Shakti work inside? From an individual standpoint, how does Avarana Shakti work? He said there is a mix-up between Drashta and Drushya. I am pure consciousness. Thoughts and Ahankara are Drushya. So the difference between both of them is hidden. I start calling myself as this person, and I start taking thoughts as my nature. Antar drugdrishyayor bhedam avrunoti. And how does it function outside? I forget this fact that this Jagat is Brahma. This Jagat is an appearance in Brahma. Because it's an appearance, you can say it is Brahma only. And I start feeling that I'm going to seek happiness in this world. I'm going to seek completeness in this world. Now, where did this notion come from? Because I thought myself to be incomplete, forgetting that I am Chaitanya. That part was hidden. I thought myself to be this finite being. And then regarding Jagat, I started going there to seek fulfillment, to seek contentment. On top of that, so many other layers got added. Those layers are all our 6 enemies. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. All different things, they are the layers added one on top of the another as part of this Vikshepa. So one thing happened at individual level. Drashta and Drushya mix-up happened. With world, name and form and Brahma got mixed up. Whenever I look at objects outside, whenever I look at beings outside, this thought gets as though hidden. This knowledge is not there, that all of this is Brahma. Attention goes mainly on Nama Rupa, and it remains only at that level. Now, 2 things we discussed, right? Regarding individual and world misunderstanding. Means effect of this Avarana and Vikshepa. What is the third thing? About Bhagavan. I forget this fact that Bhagavan is Samashti Upahita Chaitanya. As Shuddha Chaitanya, he is me, myself. As Samashti Upahita Chaitanya, this creation is Bhagavan's Upadhi. So forgetting this, Jiva feels Bhagavan is somewhere and world is there in front of me, and I am the one who is seeking happiness in this world. Okay, you see, so many things happened with just this one ajnanam which is seated at root level. So in Vedanta we say removing these erroneous notions is moksha. Moksha is not going somewhere. Moksha is ever attained. That is our own Swarupa. Right? So what are we trying to do in Vedanta? We are trying to get this understanding that I am not a finite being. I am not a person, but I am that infinite consciousness. World is not a place where I have to seek Ananda. World is a place where I have to serve, to purify this mind, and come to understand that this is nothing but Brahma. Not only understanding thoughts to be Brahma, to understand that this entire creation is Brahma, which is more difficult. Compared to this world, it appears as though thought is easy to understand, right? It is happening inside. That is how we feel. Right? To understand that thoughts are an appearance, thought is an appearance in Brahma. Thoughts are an appearance in Brahma. It is easy. But to come to understand this world is an appearance in Brahma. It doesn't have even a little bit of Ananda. Ananda is Swarupa of Atma only. Bhagavan Krishna's words, he says, Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasvama. What is Bhagavan's two-word description of this world? He says, Anityam asukham. Means if you are finding sukham in world, he says the nature of this world is asukham. It doesn't have even a little bit of Ananda. Whatever you experience as Ananda is our own Swarupa getting reflected in this mind. It never comes from outside. Having understood this fact, Arjuna, serve in this world. Imam prapya, you have attained it. You have no choice right now. But make sure that you come out of it. Don't get stuck while living here. And always keep your mind on me. In Bhagavad Gita, whenever Bhagavan says, keep your mind on me, he says, me as in this Turiya. Shuddha Chaitanya. Keeping that in mind, do all your vyavahara. Or do vyavahara in such a way that your mind effortlessly comes back to your own true nature. So these are some facets of Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. Avarana Shakti hides, Vikshepa Shakti projects on top of it. Gurudev's words, Avarana Shakti is non-apprehension and Vikshepa Shakti is misapprehension. And misapprehension is what gives lot of sorrow. Taking one thing for another. And the best example in Drigdrishya Viveka, we had seen this one, is of a magician. Right? Magician, he can show so many tricks. He can make one appear as many. Right? On what strength? Only when he covers. Only when he has avaranam first, when he is hiding something, then only he can project what he wants to project. So that's why Maya Shabda is also used as a magician. For a magician also they say, this is a Mayavi. He does so many things. Sometimes he, and so many tricks, it's mind-boggling how they do it. One person was telling me that this magician did with his watch. He came late, around half an hour late or something. 6 o'clock was the show and he came at 6:30. And he made everybody stand up and do something. And then I said, okay, look at your watch. And it was 6 o'clock. Something, I don't know how he did it. But the thing is, first hide and then project. So in Adhyatma also, our true nature gets hidden. Mainly, we are not concerned only about this true nature and everything. We are concerned about Ananda. This Ananda got hidden and we started searching somewhere else. Okay. Now Swamiji is describing what is this Avarana Shakti. Vedantasara is, as I mentioned earlier, every word is very, very precise. So after the class, whenever you get a chance, I know many of you watch it later, not during the class, not during this time, some other time. even if you are watching later, make sure that you pay attention to every word. That is the beauty of this text. Something new will open up, more precision will come. Now you see Avarana Shakti, how he is describing. 52nd verse. Avarana Shaktistavat, Avarana Shaktistavat, Alpopi Meghah, Alpopi Meghah, Anekayojana, Anekayojana, Ayatam, Ayatam, Adityamandalam, Adityamandalam, Avalokayitra, Avalokayitra, Nayanapatapidhayakataya, Nayanapatapidhayakataya, Yatha, Yatha, Achadayati, Achadayati, Iva, Iva, Tatha Ajnanam, Tatha Ajnanam, Parichinnam api, Parichinnam api, Atmanam, Atmanam, Aparichinnam, Aparichinnam, Asamsarinam, Asamsarinam, Avalokayitri, Avalokayitri, Buddhi Pidhayakataya, Buddhi Pidhayakataya, Achadayati, Achadayati, Iva, Iva, Tadrusham Samarthyam, Tadrusham Samarthyam, Taduktam, Taduktam. We can chant this together. Huh? We saw this in Hastamalaka. Ghanachanna Drushtir Ghanachanna Marakam, Yatha Nishprabham, Manyate Chati Moodah, Tatha Baddhavad Bhati Yo Moodha Drushtehe, Sanityo Swarupo Hamatma iti. Avarana Shakti Stavate. Before we see word by word, simple meaning is this. Now he is giving an example of the cloud. He says, how is this Avarana Shakti? Avarana Shakti, I will give an example of this cloud. He says, Avarana Shakti is like that cloud. Even though it is so small, it is hiding the sun, which is so big. And it is so far. How is it hiding it? It is hiding by coming in the way of my sight. Between my eyes and the sun, whatever path is there, this cloud comes in between and hides that sun. In that same way, this Ajnanam or Avarana Shakti which is there, that Avarana Shakti comes and hides my Buddhi, which is my tool for knowing Brahma. So this Ajnanam comes, Avarana Shakti comes and covers my Buddhi. And it as though hides this Atma. Ajnanam is finite. It is limited, just like this cloud was limited. But still it had the power to cover infinite Atma. Just like that cloud, even though being small, it could cover this sun which is so big. So in that way, this Avarana Shakti as though is covering Atma. Okay, this is the simple meaning of this. Now let us see every word. Avarana Shakti hi tavat alpopi megah. This Avarana Shakti, what we just described, right? Maya has two powers, Avarana and Vikshepa. So this Avarana Shakti is covering Atma. How does it cover? Just like alpopi megah, just like this cloud which is so small, alpa means small. Aneka yojana ayatam, aditya mandalam. That sun, aditya mandalam means sun, which is so far and so big. Aneka yojana ayatam aditya mandalam, that big sun. Avalokayitru nayanapatha pidayakataya. Just like this cloud covers the sun. How does it cover? Avalokayitru means of the one who is seeing that sun by coming in between his vision of sight. Avalokayitru Nayanapatha Pidayakata. Nayanapatha means I and that sun, whatever path is there. Nayanapatha. There is one stotram called as Jagannatha Ashtakam. There, Lord Jagannatha, Bhagwan Shankaracharya uses this word. He says, Jagannatha Swami Nayanapathagami Bhavatume. That, O Lord Jagannatha, may you come and show me the direction in life. Jagannatha Swami Nayanapathagami Bhavatume. May you be the one who shows me at every step what is the right perspective in transactional world also, but more for knowing my own true nature. That is Nayanapatha. In the example, it is literal vision of the line of sight that is getting covered. But what happens at Ajnanam level, later he says, Yatha achadayati iva, just like that cloud is covering that sun. It is as though covering. It is not actually covering. It is covering my eyes. It's covering my sight. It is not covering the sun, because cloud is so small. How can it cover that big sun? Just like that cloud covers the sun as though, in the same way, tatha ajnanam parichinnam api. In the same way, this ajnanam, ignorance, even though it is finite, parichinnam api, atmanam aparichinnam. This Atma Chaitanya, which is aparichinna, infinite, unconditioned, asamsarinam. This Atma, which is asamsari, doesn't take any titles. Not even of a good person, not even of a bad person, not even of a jnani. No titles, all of that is samsara only. This asamsari Atma which is there, avalokayitri buddhi pidayakataya achadeti iva. Avalokayitri means this sadhaka who is trying to know the nature of Brahma. So before Tattva Jnanam takes place, what is happening? This Ajnanam is covering his buddhi. In the example, he said, Nayanapatha Pidayakataya. You see what he is saying for Darshtanta. Avalokayitri buddhi Pidayakataya. Ajnanam doesn't cover Atma. Ajnanam only comes and covers our buddhi. Because of that, I start feeling Atma is covered. I don't know where is Atma, and I try to search for it. Tadrusham samarthyam. Achaditiva tadrusham. This alone is its power. Samarthyam means its ability is to come in our buddhi and cover our true nature. If you have studied Drugdrisha Viveka, then it will be very precise. What does this Avaranam do? That inside it hides Drashta Drushya Bheda. Thoughts are Drushya, Ahankara is Drushya, and I am that pure consciousness which is Drashta. Those two things get mixed up. Avaranam. And outside, between Jagat and Brahma, between Nama Rupa and Brahma, name and form and Brahma, they get mixed up. All this is done by this Avarana Shakti. Then example is given from Hastamalaka Stotram, Ghanachanna Drushtir Ghanachanna Markam. Ghanachanna Drushti, this is the name of this person, the one whose eyes have been covered by clouds. But he feels that sun is covered by clouds. Ghanachanna Markam. Yatha manyate nishpravam chati mudaha. His name is Ati Mudaha, very ignorant person. He is saying that sun has lost its shine. Yatha nishprabham manyate. And it is something to appreciate that clouds are seen only in the light of sun. So even ignorance which is there, that also is illumined by Brahma only. Just like clouds are seen in the light of the sun, they exist because of that sun. ignorance exists because of Chaitanya. Right? In that Vastu alone, a Vastu is getting superimposed. In that Chaitanya alone, this Ajnanam is getting superimposed. But because he does not think, he makes this statement. Tatha baddhavat bhati yo mode drustehe sanityopalabdhi swarupo hamatma. Everything is eva only. Tatha baddhavat. Therefore, because of this mix-up which is happening, this Muda Drushti feels that he is bound. In his eyes, he is actually bound. But from a Jnani standpoint, he says, you are that pure consciousness, you can never be bound. To say this statement that I am ignorant, to say this statement that I am bound, he says that is a main fundamental misunderstanding. According to Vedanta, Jnanam doesn't give moksha. Right? This point we had seen in Hastamalaka Stotram also. Jnanam only tells us that I am that Chaitanya Swarupa which never got bound. Just like knowledge of rope doesn't liberate that rope. It only tells the rope, this snake was never there in you to begin with. So in that way, we can look at it. Bhagavan Shankaracharya had written it in Hastamalakiyam Bhashyam, if you remember. He said, Jnanam only does this. This is one level above. In the beginning, we say, Jnanam gives moksha. Right? But in what way does it give moksha? It gives moksha in this way. Knowing that I'm already liberated, thinking myself to be bound by these conditionings, that itself is this ajnanam. That itself is this bondage. Okay. So there are similarities which we had seen in Hastamalaka Stotram, but we'll just reflect upon it a little bit in the next session. Similarities between Drishtanta and Darshtanta. Example of cloud and the sun, and that of Ajnanam and Atma. I think all of you can also think, what are the similarities? And also think about what is the difference. That is the key point here. Any example you take will have similarity. Any example you take will have differences. So between the example of cloud covering the sun and Ajnanam covering Buddhi, what is the difference between these two examples? Where is the limitation of both of them? Okay, let's see in the next session. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Okay. Good. All of you said unconditioned space and conditioned space is the same. Many of you said that. I'm glad you are on the same page. If body, plant, and stone are all inert, what makes it more conscious? A plant less conscious, and a stone, you can just pause for a second. It is moving up. If a body, plant, and a stone are all inert, what makes it conscious? A plant is less conscious and stone not conscious. Why do we have ahankara but not the other two? When we say jiva, plant is also a jiva. It is not that human beings are more conscious and plant is less conscious. Okay, first let us just look at humans and plants. The only difference is humans have more karmendriyas, whereas plants don't have as many karmendriyas. Karmendriya means organ of action. Jnanendriya also. The sense organs by which our vyavahara happens, that is more in humans. It is not as much in plants. That is the main difference. It is not that humans are more conscious and plants are less conscious. Degrees of freedom, that is more in human beings. Degrees of freedom is less in plants. So when you say jiva, jiva is there in human sharira also, it is there in plant sharira also. Plant ahankara is different. Human ahankara is different. Because jiva means it could have been in a human body before. We should not think that this plant has been a plant forever. That's why they say the redwood trees which are there, right? 4,000 years, some of them. So they are rishis doing tapasya. Some, samskara they must have had in the past. Bhagwan's creation is indescribable. Which jiva goes where, takes which sharira, nothing we know. But we should just appreciate that both are jivas. And because stone doesn't have sukshma sharira, that is why Chaitanya doesn't get reflected there at all. It will not suddenly start walking someday in that sense. But is consciousness different in human, plant and stone, or is consciousness the same? Chaitanya is the same. It is not that in human beings there is better consciousness. In a plant there is little dimmer consciousness, and in a stone there is even more. So Chaitanya is same, ekarasa in all of that. Does Avaccheda-vada explain the difference between how conditioned consciousness can manifest either as sentient knowing entity or an insentient known object? The same is explained very well in Pratibimba-Avaccheda-vada. Is that correct? Yes. So both these vadas are trying to explain how this one appears as many. So in that, Pratibimba-Avaccheda-vada is more powerful to explain how one can appear as many, how that same Chaitanya can appear as sentient in a particular place and insentient in another place. So that Pratibimba-Avaccheda-vada, it explains. Does conditioned consciousness and reflected consciousness mean one and the same? Are they being interchangeably used to explain these two things? That is correct. Conditioned consciousness and reflected consciousness, both are the same. But if you use Avaccheda-vada, then what will they say? Conditioned consciousness. Reflection is not the more precise word there, right? Like pot space and total space. We say total space got conditioned by that pot. So ahankara in Avaccheda-vada is conditioned consciousness. So ahankara in Pratibimba-vada is reflected consciousness. Right? Because their conditioning is there and Chaitanya is getting reflected in that conditioning. Both ways you can look at it. Why is the antakarana or sattva only present in jiva and not in harmonium? Although both are jada or anatma, made from tamas aspect of panchamahabhuta. This is where we have to go back to Tattvabodha. It will again come in Vedantasara. Antakarana is not made out of tamasic aspect of panchamahabhuta. Antakarana is made out of sattvic aspect of all five elements. Right? They combine to become antakarana. So antakarana has two qualities. One is it is sukshma. By the time antakarana is described, panchikaranam has not happened. If you remember the flow of Tattvabodha, right? It will come back again in Vedantasara. Apanchikrita panchamahabhuta. Sukshma panchamahabhuta, five of them, sattvic aspect, they form antakarana. So why is the antakarana present in jiva and not in harmonium? This is again, I think that was the question. Why is antakarana not there in this harmonium? You see, this is also karma siddhanta. With jiva, we'll express where, with what conditioning, everything is decided by karma. And for that jiva to get its own karma phala, right, there have to be different objects, different lokas are created, 14 worlds are created. This harmonium is one small part of those lokas. So because this vastu is something to give bhoga, it is not, having antakarana as such. Other jivas also can give bhoga. Like different people can give karma phalas to each other. In addition to that, there are inert objects which give different types of experiences. Okay, that is why we say it doesn't have antakarana. And when we say jiva has 5 elements, right? So jiva is, we should not make a blanket statement that it is made up of tamasic aspect of Panchamahabhuta. There are 5 elements even in jiva. There is physical body, there is subtle body, there is causal body, reflected consciousness, and pure consciousness. Vachyam, Vachya-Artha of jiva is 5 things put together. In that, in subtle body and in causal body, consciousness gets reflected. Okay, so that Sukshma Sharira is the instrument for reflection. How Brahmakara Vritti can negate Ajnana Vritti? Is it due to knowledge, Jnanam? This was the question asked on Tuesday. Yes. What was the question? Ajnana Vritti is Ati Sukshma Vritti. It is in Karana Sharira. And Brahmakara Vritti is in Antakarana. It is Sukshma Vritti. Just like any other thought, Brahmakara Vritti is at mind level. So how can Brahmakara Vritti come and remove Ajnanam, which is Ati Sukshma? Few pointers from what we had seen earlier. In Praman Vichara also we saw this. Right? What was the point? That Brahmakara Vritti is Pramanajanya Vritti. It is not something that you have gained from the world by looking at some object. It is not even created from vasanas. So Brahmakara Vritti is Pramanajanya Vritti. It is arising from thorough Shravanam of Vedanta, of Upanishad, in particular Mahavakya. Having reflected upon Mahavakya and that clear knowledge which arises from that, that is called as is Brahmakara Vritti. And the nature of this Brahmakara Vritti is, it will negate everything. It will reveal the nature of Brahma in which there is no duality. So it doesn't have to do something separate, to go and negate this Ati Sukshma Karana Sharira Vritti. When it does Apavada, when Neti Neti is said, it applies to everything. It is not only to Sukshma Sharira and Sthula Sharira, and Karana Sharira is left out. And most importantly, Karana Sharira is not another body. Right? Ajnanam alone is called as Karana Sharira. So that is true. I think that is what you mentioned, right? Knowledge is this Brahmakara Vritti. So that this knowledge comes and removes this Ajnana. Now, Ati Sukshma and everything was described so that we can distinguish it from Sukshma Sharira. We can distinguish Karana Sharira from all those things which happen in dream and in waking. Right? Ati Sukshma was not to say that Brahmakara Vritti needs to get subtler and subtler and subtler to come and remove this Ajnana Vritti. Okay? Not in that sense. But main part we should hold on to is, it is Pramanajanya Vritti. That which is arising from Upanishad, it has its own power. Provided we become Adhikari. A small condition applies there. Provided we do our sadhana, have reverence for Shastra, and mellow down our ahankara. Otherwise, Brahmakara Vritti is also the tiny voice inside which says, I am Brahma. But there are several other Rakshasas. Rama Ravana Yuddha happens inside. Bhagwan Rama is Brahmakara Vritti, and Ravana is I am Ahankara. Ravana, we know, represents Ahankara. Right? So that voice, Ahankara's voice, should go down. Then the voice of Bhagwan is heard more clearer. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha.